And a lot of times he would, and this didn't happen one or two times, it happened probably a dozen times over the several years we lived in that house. And it included cadaver dogs. They would come and sniff his car, guns to his face, handcuffed. So when anyone says, well, they were resisting arrest. Yes, I would resist arrest if somebody was continually profiling me too. Hey, thank you for having me.
Oh no, it's wonderful. So it looks like we're having sync problems when you talk. So I bet you
Oh,
I bet you I can fix that in editing. So we're just gonna push on.
okay.
Um, Thank you for doing this. And I'm just gonna get right to the point if it's okay with you, because we've talked about this before. So you are a wildly successful actress. You are huge in the sci-fi community. You've got a series going on right now. You absolutely didn't need to be doing a podcast. And you sure didn't need to be doing a podcast with me. So what made you want to do this particular podcast?
You know, it's funny when you get this far into your career and you have relationships with people, it's genuinely like a phone call. So it was Chris just, hit me up and he was like, hey, I have this project, it's a fun, we're in quarantine kind of deal if you're interested. And I was like, yeah, I'll take a look. I love the idea of it. I love the opportunity we have as artists to tell stories, particularly in genre mediums where we can explore what we as humanity do to each other, and we can remove our fragility from it so we can actually tell the story and convey it, I think, in a manner that people get. So that, you know, is riddled. This story is riddled with, power struggles and phobia and bigotry. And again, it's at a certain phase in your career, you just have friends who call you up, and Chris asked me to do it, and I was happy to do it. And I'm it was great because when we were recording it, we did this like big group call, and there was several pages where I wasn't in, and you were like, do you want to just like jump ahead and record the rest of your dialogue and you can go because we're going to be another couple hours? And I was like, no, I'm really enjoying this.
I remember that. You were wonderful.
Yeah, I was like, oh no, I'm watching it. I'm watching the teleplay happen. So,
But you're being really modest about this, because you donated a tremendous amount of time to doing this. Afterwards, because we had recording problems, we had to do separate pickups. You were always generous, always available, always a pleasure to work with. I mean, some of the brightest points of lockdown for me have been the time we spent recording together and chatting and our conversation.
me too. No, it's nice. It's nice to put your heart into something and to be creative and fulfilled. You invited my daughters to be in it, and they came on, and
They, they were wonderful.
that
They were
was
wonderful.
so
That's episode
fun.
3, guys. The kids in the refugee. No, it's episode 2. The kids in the refugee cargo ship who who Jupe saves and who are running from the aliens are actually Alaina's 2 daughters, who came in and did they
Yeah.
really were good. I mean, they had some chops.
Yeah.
So now that we've established that you were seriously the biggest pleasure to work with on the entire thing, and I just want the world to know that Alaina Huffman is a
Oh, thanks.
joy to work with all the time. But we also had some off mic talks about the themes of the show. And one of the things that's been going on lately is that I've had to start to talk honestly about what the show's about. And it's
Mm-hmm.
sometimes hard to do with everything going on right now. And I have to keep reminding people, this was written years ago. And I was wondering if you had any feelings or thoughts about that.
I do. I have a lot of thoughts about it. I too have Black children, and I was married to a Black man for a long time in Los Angeles, and I've spoken about this. It's just something that here's the thing. You live your life, you get up every day, you make the best choices that you can make, and then you maybe don't think about these things. So for anybody who does not experience blatant racial profiling or police brutality within their own family dynamic or personal dynamic, they might hear about it, they might empathize about it, they might have compassion about it. I consider myself a very compassionate, empathetic person. And I grew up listening to, Public Enemy and Wu-Tang and Tupac, and they were telling those stories then. And if you study anything of the civil rights, that's the same stories that both Malcolm and Martin Luther King spoke on. And it's not until I think you really experience it that you understand it. So I can tell you, I witnessed firsthand what blatant racial profiling is. There used to be, we lived in Burbank for a very long time. There used to be police that would wait outside of our house. Right across the street, we lived sort of on a corner. It was like an angular street. And there was a cop. My ex-husband has no criminal record, no reason to be pulled over other than he's a black man who drives a $90,000 Mercedes. Go figure. And I never got pulled over in that car. But he used to get pulled over all the time. And I remember the first time that it happened. Well, actually, let me retract, because that was by the point we were married and had kids. When we first started dating, we were living in Texas, and I'm Canadian, and I started dating my husband when I was like 18. I lived in an area of Dallas called Uptown, like Turtle Creek area. I lived in a condo, and my boyfriend would come over and visit me, and all of a sudden I'd get like a knock on the door. It's like 11 o'clock at night, and I remember him at the time, and I didn't even reflect on it until all of this just went down. That I would get a knock on the door, and he'd be like, "Don't answer it." I was like, "What?" He's like, "Don't answer it." And I was so confused. Again, I'm like looking back on it, going, "What?" It's so blatantly obvious to me now, but at the time I was like, I didn't know, and it was the police. And I would just sort of say behind the door, like, "Hello," and they'd say, "Hi, we just want to come in and see if you're okay." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." It never occurred to me that they came to my house because someone called because a black man showed up at my door. My boyfriend, who was invited. This happened probably 4 times within the year that I lived in this building. And again, it's kind of like it doesn't really affect your day because it just happens and then you go on with your life. But then when it was happening when we were married, and like I remember being on set one time and I couldn't find my husband. And I called my girlfriend to come babysit my kids because I was doing a night shoot. And I was like, I don't know if I can swear, but I was like, this motherfucker better have gotten in an accident. You know what I mean? When you don't know where somebody is and they're not calling you, and you're like, he better, like, something better have happened to him not responding to me. And then it turns out, I was like, whoa, he was like pulled over, and our car was impounded, and our stuff was it was confiscated, and he was questioned till 3 or 4 in the morning. And it wasn't until he was like, I don't know what you guys want from me. Like, I have nothing to hide. Call my lawyer. And as soon as he said he had a lawyer, they let him go. So then we go back the next day to get our car out of the impound. It was like over $500. I'm like 25 years old. We have 2 kids. We just bought a house. I didn't have a lot of money to like pay to get a car out of the impound, which wasn't our fault. I said, clearly we shouldn't have to pay for this. Like, this was not our fault. Like, he didn't do anything wrong. And the guy at the police impound said to me, "Oh, are you kidding me? For this car? We would normally keep it for 30 days to see if you can afford to get it out. And if you can't, we auction it off and keep the money."
I mean, this is a huge thing in our country. There are more people in jail just because they
Yes.
couldn't afford bail. It is insane.
And then what happens is we skew our racial ideas to create race policy, right? If you've read How to Be an Anti-Racist, Ibram X. Kendi, he talks about this, right? So you get this argument of like, well, 13% of the population commits 70% of the crime. Are they actually committing the crime, or are they just confessing to it? Are they just paying time for it?
Or
And
are they
so
the
we
ones
create.
being hauled in, to such a tremendous degree, it actually skews the I mean, the cops aren't knocking on my door 4 times a day. God knows what they'd find if they did, right? So
That's what I'm saying. So when everyone says, well, how would we ever live without police? Go to the suburbs. They live without police all the time. the police have been defunded in the suburbs. There's no one over policing those communities. But then what it does is it creates, you know, an instinct. I'd lie if I didn't say that created a riff in my marriage. That was very difficult. It went on for years. You feel, my husband certainly felt not enough, certainly felt profiled. And listen, I'm giving you the PG version. A lot of times he was, and this didn't happen 1 or 2 times. It happened probably a dozen times over the several years we lived in that house. And it included cadaver dogs. They would come and sniff his car, guns to his face, handcuffed. So when anyone says, well, they were resisting arrest. Yes, I would resist arrest if somebody was continually profiling me too.
Well, also, if you resisted arrest or if I resisted arrest, the odds of us being killed are very low. And by the way, resisting
Correct.
arrest would be defined as, not laying down fast enough. You see all
Yes.
sorts of pictures of white people yelling at cops or, carrying guns around cops, and the cops
Stealing
are like,
their cars,
yeah,
hitting them. Oh
and the
my
cops are fine
God.
with it. And then you find out, oh, well, this person didn't lay down fast enough. Let me ask you some context questions though. So you're from
Yeah.
Canada. Is this same kind of stuff happen in Canada, or was it such a shock to find it happening here?
I did not witness it in Canada, but I was also not married to a black man in Canada. But again, these are sort of experiences that happen. It's really like, you know, uh, frogs being boiled in a pot.
Yeah.
Like, you go about your life and you don't really think much of it, and you're like, oh, whatever. Cops always kind of give me a hard time. And it's not really until you look back on it and go, well, that was really unnecessary. And I bet you that doesn't happen to everybody. It's kind of when the Me Too movement happened, a lot of people started reflecting on their experiences and going like, oh yeah, that was probably not appropriate, but I was okay with it at a certain point. Or I just didn't make a fuss, because if I did make a fuss, I was difficult or I was the problem. And again, this is what creates in this current state we're in, race policy that creates race problem, that creates race superiority. And yes, and what's happening in Oregon is, this is the irony of it all, is this supremacy that is, we know as white supremacy, as the dominant race. It turns on white people too, because it's power, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Everyone who's ever, led a revolution or beaten or overthrown, something, really has not done it from a supremacy perspective, right? They've done it in a collective. You look at Genghis Khan. Khan's rise to power was um, um, it was necessary for him to band together the nomadic tribes. That's what gave him power. When we took out Hitler, it wasn't like one supreme, it was all of us coming together going, this is fucked.
This isn't like normal things. This is an institutionalized atrocity, unparalleled in human history. And but we're all good people, and we're all Americans, and America's about freedom, and it's
But
just
that's the thing, is I think what we have to do is dismantle the word racist and not use it as an adjective or a pejorative that is descriptive of our moral barometer, because it's not. It again, I think most of us would consider ourselves compassionate and loving and kind, and so when we're like faced with something like racism, it's an attack on our morality. And when we go, but you practice racist policy, it's all rooted in power.
yeah.
And when we can
Yeah.
overpower, and that's where we have to lose our fragility around it and go, oh, it's not me, I'm not a bad person, I'm loving and kind. And if we implement non-racist or policy that creates equity for minority communities, racism will dissipate, because we don't then see the class system. I really believe we as Americans are elitists more than we are racists. Our elitism just so happens to manifest itself in racism.
Elitism and fear go hand in hand too. If you're terrified of losing things, if there is no social safety net, if you could literally lose everything in a year, you're terrified of losing your position, and so you'll grasp at a system. And if that system is inherently, I hate to use the word evil because it sounds childish, but if that is unfair, if it's built to oppress, yet you desperately need it, you will twist the way you think into a pretzel
Yeah.
just to feel secure. I mean, we
Yeah.
are supporting.
Well, and if you, yeah, if you, I did this a few years ago. I was like, I really had an aha moment where I was like, I know nothing about my children and their heritage. And then I started asking around at my best girlfriend, who's a Black woman, and my family members and my nieces. And I was like, what do you know about Black history? And they know about what you and I know. And so we've denied an entire race of people. Like you said, Brene Brown says it perfectly. She's like, you have to, in order to own people, you have to dehumanize them. So then we've acclimated to a system in which we have an entire race of people who were born into a country they were never welcomed into, and then continually oppressed, and then their history has been hidden from all of us, not
Yeah,
just from them. I want to know the beauties of these cultures, right? This is something we should all celebrate. And if we subscribe to a mentality of we are all valuable, we all come up together. There should be no ghettos. Why do we tell people to get out of ghettos? Why don't we make ghettos good places?
yeah.
Put
Why?
money and infrastructure and fix street lights and put money into education and employ the people in those communities, because they want to work. They want to contribute. They're good people.
It, yes, absolutely true. If you can actually, if you can actually dehumanize anyone in your mind, then you can dehumanize anyone. And once that
Absolutely.
becomes easy, then you can start to do things like value money more than humanity. It really is the original
Yeah.
sin that I think in a lot of ways spurred capitalism. They call it the American spirit shouldn't be cruelty, but it somehow comes off as that because violence and cruelty is such a part of our history. I mean, and we don't talk about it, but you can feel it. And allowing people to starve in the
Yeah.
streets of any color should be.
Yeah.
But if you can accept one evil, and it's easier to accept another. And not to make this about something as pedantic and unimportant as entertainment, but that's kind of what the series is supposed to be about. It's supposed to take us out of this fragility, out of like, okay, let's not talk about America. Let's talk about Mars. Let's talk about, all
Yeah.
these other people. And the interesting thing, where I'm coming from, as a writer, and I wanted to just see what you thought about this, is the fact that I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Now, anyone who's been to the south side of Chicago, it's, well, it's the murder capital of the world.
Right.
There is no.
It's also really fun. They got all the good places to go.
Well, I mean, if you're not trapped there, it's a great place to visit, right? And so part of one of the reasons of taking this in science fiction stuff like that was not just to do the preachy, racism is bad and everybody should be good to data. There, we've fixed racism in television over the course of this hour, but to actually tell the stories from both sides, the harm, hopefully get people to like emotionally relate to the harm that's happening to the Genins, but also see the toll it's taking. And that's Chris's character. We want to see the fact that living in this system has basically annihilated his soul by the time we meet him, and whether or not he actually redeems
Yeah.
himself. And your character, as good as she is, as powerful as she's a hero, right? She's saving people. She's sacrificing her family for people.
Her kid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's doing all these things to try to save human beings, and yet at the same time, the moment the doors close, she's throwing slurs around, right? And that was interesting for you to play. I
Yeah.
remember we talked about that. What was that like to try to relate to someone like that?
Well, I think if you understand, like you said, that systems of oppression are just that, they're systems. They're not people, because we as people are very complex. So I actually quite enjoy playing characters like that, because I think that they're relatable. I think we all have elements of ourselves that are faulted. And so, if you, um, Eckhart Tolle talks about pain bodies, and so he talks about it like in Germany, and there's like this stain in our soul, right? And if you read anything like from Frederick Douglass or Booker T. Washington, they can remove the system of slavery or a system of oppression from individuals, because the individuals on either side of it are victims. We're all victims of the oppressiveness of it. And so for someone like my character, you can understand, because she can confirm every time she turns around, like she might have this ideal and her mission is to save the, this higher class of people. And then so every time she turns around, she's seeing something that's standing in that way. And if that's always represented by the other, then the other is the problem, when in actuality the fucking system is the problem.
Right. Yeah. And
So
yeah. And that's what we're doing with the series. It's like the system that creates all this stuff eventually becomes the villain, but unfortunately not immediately.
it's not necessarily individuals. We're all just sort of steeped, we're the frogs in the pot.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can't dehumanize one person without dehumanizing us all. We either all have to rise and fall together, which means, getting upset when we see people murdered in the street, regardless of who they are. But especially when we can recognize the fact that, these are victims of a system, and it's our system. We have to be responsible for it. Yeah, I was talking with somebody recently about reparations, and it's like, well, free college, free medical care, and a basic, survivable income for every single descendant of American slaves would change American life and character so radically in one generation, we wouldn't even recognize it.
I just got chills, because literally anyone opposed to the idea of reparations, I don't know what you're opposed to. Like, so I just saw this meme the other day that said, like, the world is like $200 trillion in debt. And they're like, who do we owe it to? Thanos?
Yeah.
Like, we literally create our own money.
Yeah. Which means nothing. It's not attached to anything anymore. It's not, money is just a concept now. It's not.
There's no backing, right? Yeah. There's no gold bars sitting in anyone's mint. But also, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense, where you're like, whoa, what are you taking away from? Like, I have 4 children. I don't choose to only give one of my kids food. We can all survive. And it just doesn't make any sense to me why all people are not taken care of. I don't understand why trans rights are not human rights. I don't understand why. This is interesting. My girlfriend has breast cancer. She's just gone kind of public with it, and she's had a double mastectomy, and her reconstruction is not covered by insurance because it's considered elective. So it's $40,000 out of her pocket. Now, okay, I can maybe conceive how it is an elective, the reconstruction aspect of it, because you technically don't.
Yeah, let's not even go there.
But even if we could, the similarity the difference is, in our insurance plan, on the male side, testicular implants are covered.
Oh, of course.
They're considered medically necessary. And so you think to yourself, like, and then anytime you bring that up, you're like, oh my God, you're playing the gender card or the blah, X.
No, that's just, it's not the gender card. It's literally, men's testicles are valued and women's testicles aren't. Not testicles, sorry, breasts aren't. I do think, though, at the very core of it, it's easy for us to accept a system. I mean, that's such an appalling, evil thing. We should be storming insurance companies, tearing them down brick by brick, just at this thought, because the idea of like making money off somebody's tragedy is appalling. But it's one of 50 appalling things in our society every day. So you watch somebody getting, begging for their life on the street as cops kill him, and then your insurance company charges you to rebuild your breast. I mean, I can tell you, I've got a child who's an epileptic and a child who's diabetic, and what it costs me every year to get enough insulin in him every day to keep him alive, and what that's done to my quality of life and the jobs I have to take, and it's been a real misery.
Yeah.
And we're fine letting a child die from diabetes. We're fine letting women be treated like second-class citizens when they're in
We were
hospital.
blamed for that. It's yeah. Whew. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
Well, I'm clearly going to
I
say
just
more good TV shows, but that's all I can think to.
it's not wrong, art, if you study anyone in, that was the whole hippie era, right? Nina Simone died riddled with cancer fighting this cause. um we are storytellers. We have I think a responsibility as nonconformists in our culture to break barriers and to tell stories and to you know um out the wrongs.
Yeah, I mean, entertainment shouldn't be facile. It shouldn't be idiotic, and too often it is. Too often it's not
Yeah,
about anything. And people can be entertained and like to think too. It's a very cynical corporate approach to pretend that people just want to be entertained. It's like, no, people are also like enjoy thinking because they do it all the time.
yeah,
And but also, but as entertainers, I'm afraid a little of it is like if all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So since it's so
yes,
big and so dramatic, you
yes.
don't know what else to do. It's like, well, I'll tell a story about it. You try at least.
Yeah, but that's where everybody has their own lane, right? That's
Yeah.
our lane. So, and
Well,
to be an advocate and to raise awareness and to be an ally, I think are really important. Yeah, I give a fuck about it all. So,
it's always a pleasure talking to you. It's not only are you very extraordinarily talented and extraordinarily kind, you're very insightful, and I love our chats. I mean, this is for those of you guys, this is what half of our recording sessions is like. We just pick a subject and go.
I know I could just keep talking. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. It's I've been loving Sentinels, and I'm grateful to have been a part of it. I hope we get to do more.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so too. We'll see what happens. I mean, it's crazy times, so I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. If
Well,
everybody just keeps listening and sharing.
yes, everybody, did you hear her? This is a wonderful
Yeah,
person
that was a
telling you
call
to
to
listen.
action.
Yeah, listen and share and comment. Really, if you've watched this video, and we hope we convinced you to go listen to at least a little of the podcast. I mean, I know we're talking about big issues and it's just a little sci-fi thing we're doing, but we care. We're trying to do something good. So at least go over there and listen to it for seconds and hit the like button. And but thank you so much, Alaina. You're wonderful as always.